Okay, I will say hello and welcome back to another episode of The Balance Breakdown. And today I am joined by MMA aficionado, MMA writer, MMA fan, and I guess you are a written analyst, Jesus Christ, analyst, a
Yep.
written analyst as well, Mr. Ian O'Neill. Ian, how you doing, sir?
Harry, how you doing, man? Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's a pleasure. I mean, I before we off air we were talking about the card last night, and we'll get back into talking about that.
Sure.
But before we get into that, like I've been following Severe now for quite a long time, right? And that's how I began to know you, and that's how I became aware of your work. But like, yeah, maybe that was one when I was thinking about this today. I was thinking like, how did you get into writing? Why did you start writing, and especially why did you start writing for Severe? So maybe if you can start there.
Well, I only started last year, but it
Yeah.
was something that I wanted to do for such a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and other things I guess were getting in the way, and it was just towards the end of last year, I just decided to make the jump, and like there was no other question for me who I wanted to do for other than
Of
Severe
course.
MMA
Of
because,
course.
like yourself, I followed the guy's work for many years as well, and have a great respect for the work that they do over there at that website. So it was a no-brainer for me, and it was an Irish website too. So it was a no-brainer for me, and I'm blessed to be over there right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's something that's huge. Really, it's like, and something else I want to talk to you about is like Ireland, in comparison to a lot of other places, is a tiny place in terms of landmass and
Hmm.
population, right?
Hmm.
But then in the same vein, it produces some incredibly skilled people in a variety of things, whether it be, boxers or MMA fighters or, you know, singers or whatever. Like, why do you think that is?
I think that Ireland has a great culture,
Mm-hmm.
and they have we're passionate people as well. So that I feel yeah, like that's why I kind of got into MMA writing and stuff like that. It was just so that I could express my thoughts and opinions and my passions towards MMA, and share with everybody. And I guess we're going back to what Ireland produced. The arts was always a big thing to
Mm.
come out of Ireland. You know what I mean? Whether it be martial arts or whether it be music or whether it be writing or poetry or whatnot. We were always very an artistic and cultured nation. So yeah, maybe that's down to passion. If you're really passionate about something, you're going to give it your all. So
Mm-hmm.
we are in general pretty passionate people. So maybe that's why we get some success for such a small nation. It's that and that amongst a lot of things. That and talent. The talent is another thing too, I guess. The two of them go arm in arm together.
Yeah, I mean, I I don't want to talk about Connor too much because that gets bundled into any Irish conversation far too often. And I think that
Yeah.
it's probably a little bit disingenuous. But there's something that Connor did say around the time that Severe did that documentary of him when he was out in Reykjavik at Mjolnir, the first Mjolnir before they
Yeah.
moved,
Hmm.
and that's that he doesn't believe in talent. He doesn't believe in the idea of natural born talent, and he believes more that if as essentially as you just said, if you're obsessed with something
Hmm.
and if you're essentially in love with it, that's when results start to come. And I think I agree with that. I think
Yeah.
it's something that I see a lot, and I'm going to use Sean Sheehan as an example. Sean Sheehan of Severe
Hmm.
MMA is Sean is obviously an incredibly smart man. He has a maths degree and all this sort of stuff, but the work that he does, I'll go out on a limb, and I don't think that it's the result of talent. I think it's the result of him spending perilous hours watching the sport, having an analytical mind, not being too emotionally invested, being a fan, loving MMA, and
Hmm.
then using the skills that he's acquired over his entire life to
For
apply
sure.
to produce the incredible content that he does, right? And now, for anyone that doesn't listen to the Severe MMA podcast, go and listen to the Severe MMA podcast
Absolutely do, yeah.
because there is, you know, there may well be MMA content on this podcast, but Sean is a wealth and breadth of knowledge, as is Graham, as is whoever he decides to have on at that time. But yeah, like I think that's the result of skill acquisition. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. There's a certain level of talent that is involved in getting your point across too. You know, kind of staying neutral, staying biased as well, and it's something that I'm learning to do right now as well. In that the transition of, you know, from me watching the sport for so long, transitioning to doing more content and coverage on it, as well as trying to stop being a fan and more look at it as a broader picture and not biased. Like, you know, rather than going with your heart, you go with your head, I guess it's trying to say. And it's hard to do, you know what I mean? It's hard not to get caught up. And well, I think with the whole Conor McGregor situation and the way he came up, the guys have done a great job over there of not being biased, and they've said it exactly as it was all the way along with him and with every other fighter as well, you know, and that's what you want.
Of course, because I mean, you know, people forget that, you know, it wasn't just Conor, right? There was the entirety of the Irish invasion at that time. Obviously, Conor is the one that rose to the highest pinnacle, but it wasn't just Conor, right?
No.
So, and I agree with you that the coverage around that time from Severe was phenomenal and has continued to be phenomenal. You know,
and you had guys before Conor as well, you know, and they were doing their thing with those guys as well. It was just, you know, it was great the way it worked out for everybody, that they all came up together and it was all documented. It was fantastic. Like,
I agree, and I think what you raise is a good point, and that's that Severe MMA is not a result of Conor McGregor. They were there before, and they will continue after. It is more that, you know, they, and rightfully so, they were given extra highlight simply because, one, they're an Irish organization that had links into the McGregor camp, right, and into SBG, and that's through all fault of their own, right? That's because Graham has those ties and they've built those relationships over many years, but also because the content they were putting out was good, healthy, reasonable content. It wasn't the Irish media, not the MMA media, but the mainstream media that were just, you know, still calling the sport barbaric and that were doing everything in their fashion to downplay McGregor's hype until such a time when he reached the pinnacle, and then they were jubilant about it, and then, you know, subsequently various things have happened, and they're now back on the hating MMA train. But, you know, Severe is somebody that have kept consistent over the 8 years that I've been following them.
Absolutely, yeah. And, you know, like you said, with the documentaries, with all the content that you see coming from the guys, it's always been top notch. Yes. And like, I was following it down through the years myself, and the only reason why I wanted to go and do some work with Severe MMA was because of seeing that work in the past and the quality of it. And like, I want to be involved in that kind of thing and get the advice from the guys who've been doing it for a long ass time. So I'm really lucky to be in the position I'm in right now, where I can get some guidance, or I can get some advice along the lines from the likes of Sean or Graham or whoever else, Andy and stuff like that, you know. Yep. And like, I'm only a baby in this. I'm only getting going. I have lots to learn, and I feel right now that it's the perfect place to get in there and learn what it's all about and get some advice and produce my content, and look to always stay producing good content and look to improve it. It's ever so slightly, you know, and that's it. I have to try and remember I'm only getting going, and I plan on being around and doing this for a long time. So it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. And I think something that is interesting to me is that, so obviously the most of the Severe MMA guys live in Ireland, right? But you no longer live in Ireland.
No, that's right. Yeah. I live in Canada.
7 hours the other way, right?
Yeah.
So like, how does that work? for you? Do you find that's a benefit for you?
Right now, at the stage I'm at, where I'm just producing written content, it's not really. It actually works in my benefit, because if I'm covering UFC fights or covering Bellator fights, I don't have to stay up until all hours of the morning and cover it. So like the fights for me last night were over at like 8:30 p.m. in the evening. It's perfect.
Oh
So
my Jesus
yeah,
Christ.
it's awesome. But I did it for many years when I was living back home, just watching the events where you're staying up until all hours in the morning, and yeah, I have to say I don't miss that at all. It's
Yeah.
you could probably tell me you were up late last night yourself, so, and same as anybody else who was covering back in Europe. So the benefit of me doing it while being in Canada is that, yeah, it's at a pretty reasonable enough time. But on the other end of the stick too, I like to keep an eye on European MMA, and that is on quite a little bit of an awkward time. It'd be on earlier in the day, but it's still workable most of the time.
Yeah, and I think that's something as well, is like most of the MMA news, whether it be Bellator or UFC, or obviously the two biggest brands, that's going to break in your time rather than our time, right? And that's something like, so for instance, for me, generally my ritual on a Saturday is I'll watch the fights, and then I wake up in the morning. I wake up later in the morning,
It's morning somewhere.
Exactly. And I have a read of the news that's come out from that event, right? Like, how much did people get paid? Who's in hospital? What sort of injuries are we looking at? What sort of fallout are we looking at? Who's calling out who, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, whereas for you, like, that can just happen in instant time. Like in the same evening that you've been watching the fights, you can carry on. And then, you know, a lot of, at least to me, a lot of media is about not just great content, but it's about timing, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, everyone's chasing the breaking story. Everyone's chasing the greatest content at the quickest time, right?
For sure. And that's why, like, while I do my previews and do results and stuff like that for the website, I do break some news as much as I can. When I say break news, is when I find get news from that somebody else is after breaking, and share it on our website. But it does, yeah, like most news would break for me in the evening times over here, at like whenever they announce it. The UFC will normally make an announcement in the evening time over here, so it works out well. If anything does happen majorly, I can just cover it straight away, try get it up there straight away. Like you said, it's about timing, and you want to get the story out first, I guess. So, and that's something, you know, like you figure it out along the way, who gets like, you know, a certain amount of people will get a certain amount of traction. Like if you want to go back to Conor McGregor, and that's why he's probably used so much in media, is that, you know, when you see his names, it equals clicks. But you got to figure out who will get you the clicks, who won't get you the clicks, and what news people are interested in. And generally, you know, the casual fans are going to lean towards the UFC and that type of news. You know what I mean? They're the biggest organization in the world, so it makes sense that organization gets the most amount of coverage. But on the other end of the stick, I'm also interested in what's going on back home in Irish MMA as well.
Of course.
And yeah, and it is a little bit harder, me being in Canada, trying to stay on top of that, especially with breaking news stories as well. It's just, they normally happen during the middle of the night over here, so you're not going to be on hand to break it as soon as you would like. But it's still, you know, there's a lot of people that don't look out for breaking news. You know, it's like you said, you'd pop in the next morning after a fight, or somebody might miss a couple of days of MMA news, and they might want to pop onto the likes of Severe MMA and check out what's been happening. So whether you get it done straight away or a couple of hours later, it doesn't really matter once the news is up there. For me right now, I'm not too concentrated on breaking news or getting exclusives. I just want to get the content and share it out for people to see whenever they want.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the same. Like, it takes me, and I was going to ask you how long it takes you to do your previews and stuff, because there's two kinds of previews at the moment that I'm doing. I'm doing the podcast version with Sean and hopefully yourself next week and whatever. But then I'm also doing the written ones for Attack the Back. And, you know, I'll say how I do them, and then I'd like to hear your thoughts. Like when I'm doing my visual research to go back and watch fights to be like, how's this fight going to play out? I make notes as I'm watching fights. So for the preview for Izzy Costa, I wrote 2,000 words of notes just for Israel Adesanya Costa, and I rereading them. I was like, "What the fuck? Why have I fucking done this? Like, what a waste of my time." But you know, like it's. I think for people that read the previews, because obviously they're not short things, right? They're not like a 3-minute read. You've really invested some literacy into these things. You know, I think it's the work that goes in that people also don't see. You know, like I'll be preparing one of these for a week, right? Because I don't have the time to just go and do it all in a day generally, especially for a big card like Izzy Costa, where I mean, we'll talk about that fight in a second, but that fight to me is pretty easy, straight up and down. But you could be looking at you know, like if we're picking Hamzat Chimaev's next opponent, right? You're like, okay, fuck, like let's have a think about that. And that takes a lot of research. And or you know, when Conor was going to fight Habib, like that took a lot of thinking. Or Izzy, and I think probably the longest that I've ever researched a fight is Izzy versus Anderson Silva.
Yeah,
because that fight is just so unbelievably nuanced, right? And yeah, I mean, I only really did a preview for myself for that, but yeah, I mean, how do you do those sorts of previews? What's your process?
I'll start pretty much similarly enough to what you do, and I'll start watching some tapes, watching back some old fights, and start taking some notes. I like to get a clear picture in my head first by watching back old fights, and before I even write anything. So I'll be thinking about what my thoughts on the fight before I start writing them down. It's for me, I like to go as far back as possible and try to look at the progression of a fighter, like little intricacies that or changes that they have made maybe in between fights, or if they showed something new in between fights. Looking back, because I'm getting prepared right now to do a preview next week for the Izzy and Costa fight. You know, I've been looking back at a lot of old fights from the two of those guys over the past week or so. So like basically I've been preparing to start to write it either today or tomorrow. And you're basically starting your preparations the week before. You don't want to do it too early because maybe some stuff might go out of your head, or how you want to say something might go out of your head. But yeah, once you take notes, you give yourself a certain guideline. And when it gets down to the writing, and I'll just go and kind of just try get into a certain flow of what I'm thinking or how the fight may go in my head. And sometimes that flow can happen really easily, or sometimes you might struggle to explain how you're feeling about the fight. Or so, like for me, when I'm doing my previews, or I do two kinds of previews. I do my fight for fighting, which is a preview of 5 fights on a certain card. And then I do just my standard pay-per-view previews. So for my fight for fighting, it's just like 5 fights that I'm most looking forward to myself. So where I'll share basically my own opinion along with a couple of facts, and then kind of integrate the two of them in together on how I feel the fights may go. And that's something I had to build since I've started too, is the confidence in expressing my opinion maybe a little bit more. Yeah, and I'm still learning to do that, and I'm still in a transitional process at the minute where I am getting a little bit more confidence as I produce more content of getting my opinion out there, because you know it's not easy to kind of sit down there and write about a professional athlete and say how good or how bad that they are, especially when you're trying to criticize a fighter. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, but you know, you have to say it as it is, really, you know, and when you do that, that's the most important thing, is saying it as it is and giving an honest opinion and an educated opinion. And that's what I strive to do. And with my previews, it's like I look at those and I think what would an MMA fan want to see in a preview?
Mhm.
They want to see an honest opinion, and they might want to hear a couple of facts that they might not have known before reading or whatever. And then I throw in a couple of free fights and other stuff like that, because I with my writing, it's kind of like I like to say what I feel or how the fight is going to go. And then, if I'm talking about, for instance, say John Jones fight, yeah, I'll talk about John Jones and how he beat DC. And then, yeah, luckily enough for me, the UFC will throw that free fight up on YouTube. So I can talk about why I feel it's going to happen. And then I can put the video down, and it gives like maybe a different perspective or a different understanding for somebody who's reading it or watching that, why I said it. I kind of, and I'm still kind of finding my groove too. Maybe a year down the line, I might do it a completely different way. But I like to not overload information, but squeeze as much information about the whole card in as I can without overloading it. It's tough. I'm still finding my method, but
I agree. Like the first preview I wrote for Attack the Back was 6,000 words. And I was like, okay, I think this is too much. Like, let's trim that down a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super paranoid about that too. It's like, Sean has said to me too, like, not cut down on my paragraphs, but just nice little tight breakdowns. But I'm guilty once I get going. It's just like I have maybe 6 or 7 paragraphs written, and I without even realizing, it's like, I just end up keeping it in.
Yeah, because the thing that's important to me is I want to tell the story of the fighters, because I think something that's sincerely lacking in MMA at the moment is originality. Like Dana White came out recently saying that Israel Adesanya, he doesn't like the idea of Israel Adesanya having another walkout like he did against Robert Whittaker. His words were, he wants walkouts to be as minimalistic and fast as possible, which is such a fucking Dana White thing to say.
Yeah,
right?
It's no crack whatsoever. Like, come on.
Yeah, and what that is he doesn't want originality. He doesn't want individuality. He doesn't want brands outside of
he wants
the
it when he
UFC
suits
brand.
him. Yeah, he wants it when he suits him, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, unless your name is, like, let's be honest, unless your name is Conor McGregor, he doesn't want your brand. Like, he doesn't,
Well, that's fun. That's the fun aspect of MMA. And, like, you need that in the sport of MMA.
Of course.
So you do. And that's what it was always about. It was always about the freak shows and the fun and the wildness. And, like, I enjoyed that. That's his thing. It was pretty cool. It was unique. And it brought on a ton of buzz at the time when he did that routine before he came in. So I was surprised to hear Dana White say that.
I'm not.
About him. Yeah.
I'm really not.
Well, I guess.
Like, I think Dana White is really good at doing two things. He's really good at lying, and he's really good at stamping out people, right? Like, really, really good. Like the stuff he says about Khamzat Chimaev, saying that he's the most special fighter he's ever seen. Like,
how many times have we heard that before?
Exactly. How many times? The most special fight. Okay, bro. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, fine. And somebody put up on Twitter the other day when he's talking about Poirier and Ferguson, and he's saying, "Oh, Poirier doesn't want the fight." Somebody Googled Dana White saying X fighter doesn't want the fight, and there's about 25 listings there from John Jones, Chuck Liddell, Cormier, Connor, all these people like don't want to fight. It's like are you not bored of saying the same things over and over and over again? Right?
Yeah, it's like I was just thinking about the situation with Adesanya and him trying to pour water on the entrances and everything like that, and just wondering, is he wary of getting himself into another situation and in creating a star like with Conor McGregor? That Conor McGregor got bigger than the UFC towards the end, and I'm just wondering, is he wary of doing that again, or does he want a problem like that again?
Yep. So in the first line of my preview, or in the first couple of paragraphs of my preview, I say, like, in the midst of Conor taking a back seat, he called retirement, he's doing charity things. Like, he's not in the cage right now. He's not in the cage as often as he was sort of 3 to 5 years ago. Like, Izzy is the new guy, right?
Yeah.
But Dana is going to, as you rightly say, I am almost sure, Izzy is amazing when he's bringing pay-per-view buys in.
Mm-hmm.
But if Dana could dampen that brand outside of fight week for Israel Adesanya, then he would. He absolutely
for sure.
would.
And to be honest, I don't think Dana White has too much to be worried about, because even though he is a star right now, Adesanya, you know, he's not a patch on the level of star that McGregor was. Not even close. Yeah.
Like, there's
he
no
is
was.
Right now.
There is no was. You could have Dana could announce that Conor McGregor is going to be fighting in 6 months against me and you on the same night in the same cage, and it would blow up like nothing. Nobody gives a fuck who we are. Nobody even knows who we are. It doesn't matter. If Conor McGregor is making a walk to the octagon with those gloves on, he could be fighting a tin can, and it would sell 1 million pay-per-views. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's the difference. You see, you know, it's capturing the imagination of the casual fans, and that's what sells pay-per-views, man. You know, it's like, it's capturing the imagination of people who don't normally look. You know, the likes of me and you, we're going to be there week in, week out, no matter who's fighting it. But it's like, to be a star, it's about capturing the imagination of the casual fans and going from there. And yeah, we've not seen the likes of it since McGregor, and I'm not sure, maybe the UFC don't want anything. They want stars, that like, they definitely want stars, but I don't know if they want superstar status to the level of what McGregor has right now, or did have on the way up. He has extreme pulling power there whenever he's negotiating and everything like that, and losing that level of control for a person like Dana White is not ideal.
But I do think it's counterproductive, though.
Imagine
if the UFC were in a time where they had Brock fighting, Ronda fighting, GSP fighting, Izzy fighting, and Conor fighting all at the same time, all at the height of their prime.
Mm-hmm.
That's an unstoppable money-making machine.
It is, for sure. It is,
you know
for
what I mean?
sure.
Chuck Johnny Jones in there, although he doesn't really sell that many pay-per-views in comparison to those guys, but Chuck John Jones in there and Chuck Anderson Silva in his prime, right? Jesus, like I think the thing that is so crazy to me is that you have these guys. I was looking at the payout from last night. So Tyron took home, I think, 350,000 base pay, no win bonus.
Right.
And Colby took away 300,000 purse and 100,000 win bonus.
Right.
From then, other than Cowboy, everyone earned under 40K.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I didn't see the figures, but yeah, they trend pretty similarly. It's like pretty top heavy in there, you know. I was trying to explain to somebody that is not too familiar with how it works, is that, you know, there's a common misconception is that if you're in the UFC, you're making big money, but
yes,
it's not the reality.
Absolutely nothing like that.
No, it's not the reality at all. You know what I mean? You're going in there for very small money, for the level of commitment and the level of training that you have to do. It's very small money, and it's probably the biggest problem in the sport of mixed martial arts right now is fighter pay.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I'm actually in the works is an article on fighter pay because of the Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson thing. And it's something that's just, it doesn't make any sense to me. It makes absolute sense to me, and it makes absolutely no sense to me in the same vein. It makes absolute sense because if you're Dana White, you're running a business, and you're Ari Emanuel, you're running a business. If you can, and this is kind of in a way why I think in some fashion it's good that they've got McGregor hanging around, commenting on fights, doing this, doing that, but not fighting, because I haven't got to pay him anything.
Yeah, exactly. They'll have to pay him something, but nothing along the lines that they would have to pay him if he was to step in and fight, you know?
Right. I mean,
and they don't want him doing that right now anyway, because they don't want to miss out on that big, large gate that they would get. You know, you're talking about 18 million gate anytime he fights, which is colossal money to be losing out on it if you're a company, and you can understand why they would not want him to fight during this time.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
It's smart of them to be putting other ideas together, whatever they are. I don't know, but I'm not really interested in seeing Conor McGregor do anything, only fight, to be honest. And that's the truth.
I agree. I don't want to see him fight Manny Pacquiao. I don't want to see him
No,
fight Floyd again. I don't want to
no,
see him fight any of these YouTube stars. Like, I I have a big disdain about Connor, to be honest. Like, Connor to me is somebody that could have been the greatest fight that we've ever seen. Could have been, right?
absolutely.
His run up in 145 is something that we're probably never going to see again. His to then go and beat Eddie in the way he did was unbelievable. The Diaz trilogies were so beautiful. The Diaz fights were so beautiful in the sense that, you know, he owned the loss so brilliantly and he came back, and even that was a controversial fight, and
Hmm.
and all of those things. And, you know, then when he went to 170, there's 170, 155, 145. Not that I ever want to see him step on the scale at 145 again, because they were
No,
disgusting
yeah, pretty
scenes.
bad one.
But like 155, 170 were UFC's and are UFC's strongest divisions in a lot of ways. And there were so many fun matchups. Let's just take 155. There are so many fun matchups for Conor McGregor at 155.
Oh,
So many fun
absolutely.
matchups at 170. Like, if that, and again, for somebody like Conor, it doesn't even matter if you lose. It doesn't even matter.
No, not as much as it used to anyway anymore. So I
No.
think, unfortunately, you say you want to see him, but I think the reality of the situation is that we're probably not going to see him as much as we would like, and it's a shame that we've only got to see him a handful of times at the 155-pound weight class as well, because I truly believe that that's his best weight. You've
Yep.
seen what he did against when he won the title, the lightweight title against Eddie Alvarez. He was sensational. So
One of the best
we,
performances I've ever seen.
yeah, that's for sure. It's right up there. But I think probably those days are gone.
Oh, for sure.
For like, it's hard. It's hard. Must be hard for him to get motivated now, and he hasn't made. Um, we're only going to see him come in and fight the likes of maybe Masvidal, Diaz, maybe a Habib rematch. But if you're the UFC, you're going to do the Habib rematch, but you're not going to be expecting, if Conor McGregor wins, for him to be sticking around and defending the title either. I just can't see it happening.
I agree.
So I reckon I'd like to see him come in and maybe fight next year if he was going to come back. I think there's a very good chance of it, and probably go against maybe Masvidal or Diaz or somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll make good money. There'll be good buzz about it, and it's two of those fights are winnable fights for him, very winnable fights for him.
Yeah, I think so. Well, they're winnable fights if he is the Conor, if he's somewhere near the Conor of old.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah,
he's not, and if he's Conor that's just turning up, having half-baked a training camp, they're very losable fights. You know what I mean?
and where we've seen Conor McGregor at his best was when he was competing like in a row.
Frequently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bang, 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 and he's like that's when he was at his best. He was talking about this season and fighting a couple of times this year, and it hasn't worked out. But yeah, maybe if he was to come back, that might be the best route again, is get a couple of quick fights and getting back into the groove.
Yep.
He's taking these long layoffs are never good for fighters.
No, and I mean, let's. Well, I want to call time on the Conor talk, because I did say that we weren't going to talk too much about him. And I think, one of the problems that you get with MMA conversations is that a lot of them can just be surrounded by simply Conor, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, I mean, give me your thoughts on what happened last night. So last night, for people that didn't watch the card, we are looking at Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington, and then the co-main event was Donald Cerrone versus Nico Price. We had Mackenzie Dern on the card. We had a whole host of other fighters. What did you think of last night?
Great card overall. The prelim sections of the card was tons of action, plenty of good knockouts out there as well. Running into the main card, which started off pretty good as well. We spoke briefly about before we started recording about the co-main and main events maybe not living up to expectations. And yeah, I didn't think the Cowboy and Price fight was all that bad. I do believe that Nico Price probably showed Cowboy a little bit too much respect. Kind of wanted to be his friend more so than punch him in the face, which, you can't really have that attitude when you're in there and you're trying to fight a guy. So, he came close to finishing early on, and I think he kind of gassed himself out trying to do so
It seemed
in
that
the
way.
first round. Yeah, and maybe it was an adrenaline rush from, you know, he had a lot of admiration for Cowboy before he went in there, and they kept it friendly before, during, and after the fight. So when you've got that level of respect for someone, I don't know if you'll have that maybe killer instinct to maybe get him out of there or give it all. It's tough. It was really tough for him. But Cowboy showed good durability. I was worried for him early in the fight. He looked like he was getting a little bit overwhelmed. But yeah, he does what Cowboy does. He got himself back into the fight and secured himself the draw. And yeah, probably deserved the draw considering that the point was taken from the eye poke.
See, I do have a different opinion. I think Donald Cerrone's done, to be honest. Like,
I do too. I think that like he would do not that good against any top 10, top 15 guy at all. I think he's going to get eaten alive. Nico Price was the right level of fighter that he should be fighting at this stage of his career. Yeah. And he still struggled at times.
Yeah, I mean, Cerrone did what Cerrone does in fights, in that he started very slowly. He got smashed for about 2 minutes and then decided to wake up and start fighting. But he just looked really labored, and he looked slow, and he looked methodical. And, you know, some of the flashes of old Donald was there, right? Like, the kicks were still nice. He'd added some head movement. Some of the shoulder rolling was nice. He mixed in his takedowns now and again. But on the face of it, he just didn't look like Donald of even 2 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Like a year, 2 years ago.
I saw him talking after the fight, and he was saying he wanted to let his kicks go a lot more. So even he himself wasn't that impressed at how he performed. And I think you see some fighters get to a certain stage of their career, and I think we've seen it as well with Tyron Woodley in the main event, you know, like where he's just not letting go as much as he used to anymore. And is it a mental block? Is it the fact that, I don't know, what he feels that he doesn't have it anymore? It's crazy, you know, like a guy like Woodley or like Cowboy who never was afraid to let it go or anything like that. You know, when Woodley lets it go, man, it's like, it's pretty explosive, and he can do some serious damage. And last night was the perfect opportunity for Woodley to do that against Covington. Like, just go in there, throw some caution to the wind, just bite down and throw heavy shots. And like, he was never going to win a battle by standing in front of Covington looking to try pick him off on the feet. It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, Covington was actually a good stars matchup for Woodley. Mm-hmm. The reason for that is, sure, Covington is an excellent wrestler, and we saw him take Tyron down a couple of times. We also saw Tyron take Colby down, which is something we haven't seen in many a fight of Colby Covington. Mm-hmm. But Colby is a pressure fighter. He's going to come. He's going to come to you. He's going to come to you. But what we don't see from Colby is insane knockout power in one shot, right? No. He hit Kamaru Usman a lot, right? Didn't put him away. If Tyron Woodley connects with that right hand, it's very, very likely that you're going away, right? The Shadow Realm is calling you, and you're going at ultra fast speed if Tyron Woodley cracks you with an overhand right. And yet, you know, Tyron obviously was going to have to defend takedowns, right? That's what Colby does. But he defended most of the time pretty well, did well, landed some knees, got eye poked. These things happen. But then there were definitely times there where Tyron of, 3 years ago would have been putting that right hand to really, really good use. And, you know, my question to him, and my question just generally, is there isn't a fighter in the welterweight division that you'd be happy to take a shot off like Colby Covington, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I agree. It's like, and that was what was a little bit baffling to me last night too. Like, what the way the fight materialized last night and the way it went down wasn't really that surprising to me. I expected Covington to come out and like he knows, like, you know, he knows that he had to look out for that big right hand.
Of course.
And that's what he was going to do. He was always going to do that. Like, so, like, you're looking towards Tyron Woodley here to make something happen. And, you know, he started off well. He started setting a good pace. But Covington was smart. He mixed in the wrestling and clinching and just got Woodley a little bit tired, and more as the fight went on and the energy started sapping out of Woodley. And I guess looking after the fact with Woodley's rib injury as well probably had something to do with that as well. But his rib wasn't injured at the start of the fight. And like once Colby Covington started turning the pressure up and started turning the heat up as the rounds went on, it just looked less and less likely that Woodley was going to do anything.
It just reminded me a lot of the Robbie Lawler fight, where you've got a fighter backed up against the cage looking for one big shot.
Yeah.
But never having the opportunity. Like with Tyron, I thought he had the opportunity to throw against Covington.
Definitely.
I didn't think Covington, like Covington is an excellent fighter. I didn't think last night was one of his better performances, to be honest. I thought he put a better performance on against Usman and a better performance against Lawler. But, you know, Tyron had chances to throw those counters, throw those bombs. Robbie Lawler wasn't really given a chance because Covington just put on an absolute masterclass of, you think I'm going to punch you, I'm going to take you down. You think I'm going to take you down, I'm going to punch you.
He was fighting a Robbie Lawler back then, who since that fight has had a similar problem as well, and is he's not letting go. But back when Colby did fight him, you know, Lawler wasn't at that stage yet in his career.
Correct.
He was throwing. So I believe that Covington, he couldn't give Lawler that chance to let go because Lawler would let go. And you know what that means. That means trouble if Lawler connects, you know. Maybe from past experiences with Woodley and sparring with Woodley, or maybe seeing Woodley over the past couple of fights, made Colby fight the way he did last night. Because I agree with you, what you said 100%, is I feel that Covington didn't perform to the levels that he performed against Usman. He was a little bit a step behind last night for me.
Still utterly dominant, right?
Absolutely. So then you got to ask yourself the question: did he fight to the level of competition that he was facing? So, you know, like the famous statement that Usman said, that he was only fighting at 30%. So maybe we had Colby doing that too. Maybe he didn't want to show his full card last night, you know, because he is after moving to a new camp now. And so there'll be new techniques and new things being shown in fights from now on. Maybe he didn't want to show all of his cards before he would take a future fight with possibly Usman or maybe Masvidal down the line.
I think that Masvidal fight is a terrible matchup for Masvidal.
Yeah.
A terrible matchup.
I think that Masvidal caught some legit hype, and he deserves it for everything that he's done in the sport. But the level of fighter that he is compared to maybe to the elite fighters in his division, I don't think he matches up with those guys. I don't think he beats the likes of Woodley or Gilbert Burns. You hear me, Woodley. I mean, Gilbert Burns, he would have trouble with Usman, like we've seen in the title fight. I believe if that was a rematch, I think Usman would handle him as well, and also with Covington as well. Masvidal has always had his trouble with good wrestlers, you know, when they look to clinch and take him down. So, but you know, he's smart fights for Masvidal to take now would be the Nate Diaz fight or McGregor
fight.
Nick
Diaz fight is the smart fight.
Absolutely is. That's sell like hell, and it's a very winnable fight for Masvidal for sure.
Yeah. If I was matchmaker, I would be saying to Masvidal and Nick Diaz, like I say to Nick, like Masvidal broke your brother's face, even though he didn't really. And you know, do you want to get that back? Nick talked about getting that back, right? He spoke on publicly about wanting that fight. Man, the return of Nick Diaz with Gamebred, that storyline is so easily sellable, right? So easily sellable.
It sells pay-per-views. Well, if you think about it this way, there has been talks of Masvidal, Nate Diaz 2 happening for the BMF title.
That'll work.
It would work, but it's a path to sell if Masvidal was to go in there and beat Nate again and just say Nick Diaz is in his brother's corner, and then maybe it kicks off after that fight. It's a certain way of getting a bit of hype around the Nick Diaz and Jorge Masvidal fight if it were to go down in the future. But I think you have to tread carefully now with Nick Diaz on his return. You know what I mean? There's no point in throwing him to the wolves straight away. You know, he's been away for a long time. He's out of cage antics over the last couple of years. You know, he's supposed to be boozing heavy in Vegas, allegedly. So
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah. So there's plenty of stories that have come out there. Yeah, you've seen the interview with Ariel Helwani, and he looked a little bit out of sorts. But it's great to see him back in shape, and I hope he makes a successful return. But when you're throwing him in there with the likes of Jorge Masvidal, you know, I don't know how well he would cope after being out for so long. I don't know if that's the level of opponent you want to throw him in against.
You know what I think the UFC are going to do, right? Like,
Okay.
so in fight week, Dana was asked about Leon Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's happening with Leon Edwards? And he was like, Leon should sit tight and wait because there's something fun coming his way. There's a big thing coming his way. That sounds like Nick Diaz to me.
Yeah, that would get him some notoriety, but as regards moving up the ladder or making this claim for a welterweight title shot, it's not going to do jack for him, really, if he was to go in. If for somebody like Edwards now, I wouldn't take Dana White's advice and sit back. I'd be looking for his fight as soon as possible, because he is a man who is absolutely being forgotten about right now in the title conversation, you know, and he needs a fight quick, and he needs to remind people of the type of fighter that he is and the quality that he has. And he's been getting a little bit chirpy on Twitter now, trying to get a bit of attention, and you can't blame him for that. But he's certainly been left out into the cold, and he needs a fight quick.
I think you give him the Covington fight.
You give him that would be a smart fight to give him. I personally would like to see him fight someone like Wonderboy or somebody like that. I think they're under the same management, but like that doesn't really matter. I think that's a fight that makes sense for both fighters. For Leon Edwards, it's a good name if he were to beat Wonderboy. Mm-hmm. And for Wonderboy, it gets his name right back into the title mix if he were to beat somebody like Edwards. I think it makes sense, but there hasn't been really too much talk about that. It's just something that I would like to see myself. But I definitely think Edwards needs a fight as soon as possible.
I agree. I wouldn't mind Wonderboy Nick Diaz, actually.
That would be a good fight. Like, let's be real. Like, Nick Diaz versus anyone is going to be awesome, man.
I agree.
He's just a legend of the sport. It's just, you know, after being away for so long, I'm just wary. You don't want to see him going in there and getting destroyed, you know? That's not going to do any good for anybody.
I think it might happen, though.
Yeah, it might. I'm waiting to see. Even if he does return, it's all up in the air right now who they will match him up against before I make any decisions on how it's going to go. But
I reckon we should do a tag team. Masvidal and McGregor versus the Diaz brothers.
Oh, jeez, that would be mayhem.
Let me see it. I want to see it. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's get crazy. Let's have some fun.
Indeed. What do you think about Khamzat Chimaev and Gerald Meerschaert?
Oh my goodness! I mean, I was speechless last night. You know, I fancied Chimaev going into the fight. Mm-hmm. I actually fancied Meerschaert maybe to even bring him to a decision, and I could not have been more wrong. I mean, like, to go out and did what he did after all the trash talking and after doing, like, to knock Meerschaert out after 17 seconds with basically one punch, it was phenomenal. Like, you know, you're seeing something special when you see that guy. There was question marks about his stand-up, but there's no question marks anymore because he's knocking middleweights out. And this guy is a natural welterweight, man. Mm-hmm. You know, he's a natural middleweight, but he cuts down to fight at welterweight. But, you know, when he's knocking out bigger guys, he's going to be a real force to be reckoned with in the welterweight division. It's like he should pick a division that he wants to go in now and just start making his run towards the title, because he's a special fighter. I think he's a really special fighter, and he's got the style to do some real damage. I'm not saying put him in against a top 5 guy just yet. I don't think he's quite there yet, but he's definitely ready for a legit challenge next. I personally would like to see him fight Vicente Luque. Like you
Yes,
said,
my fucking man. Yes,
yeah.
right. Okay, so let me put this to you. So a couple of my friends were like having a conversation about Shimaev and whatever, and guys, like there are two routes I think you take with Shimaev. One is what my friend Sean McGuinness has said, co-host of the Balance Breakdown, and he said because in coronavirus time, there's not many people that are going to fight super regularly. Yet Shimaev has fought 3 times in 65 days or whatever it is. You can use that, let him bounce, let him continue to bounce between middleweight and welterweight for another 3 fights, 4 fights against guys at a similar sort of range as Gerald Meerschaert, really grow his name. And then when doors are open, maybe beginning of next year or something, then you can give him a Vicente Luque or anyone in the top 15 of either division. I imagine he's going to choose welterweight, right? But let's say he chooses middleweight, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Pick a top 15 guy and give him to him. That top 15 guy, if it is welterweight for me, is either Neil Magny or Vicente Luque. The reason why Neil Magny is because Neil Magny can implement a game plan really well if the right Neil Magny turns up. And I think he's got good striking, he's got good wrestling, and he's durable enough. But the dream fight at the moment, give him War Vicente Luque and let's have some fucking fun.
Violence. That's what we need, and that's what you get when you see Vicente Luque fight.
Yeah.
You know, and I think he's going to bring it. You need somebody who wants to step in there and bring it. Like, and everybody does want to bring it when they get in there. But you've seen instantly, straight away, once that fight started, Shimaev just instant pressure, had Meerschaert on the back foot straight away, and you can't be doing that when you're fighting someone like Shimaev. You need to put Shimaev on the back foot. Yeah, for sure, if you're to have any success whatsoever. But you know, when you have power like he showed last night, and you've got that wrestling style that he has, you're going to be big trouble for a lot of fighters. You know, it's going to take somebody who's able to neutralize his wrestling and hold their own. And he's going to get that challenge when he moves up on the ranks and when he fights those elite type fighters.
Yeah,
it's a game right now with the UFC is how quickly do you want to push him or what do you want to have him doing? Because everyone has been saying lately that the UFC have been pushing fighters maybe a little bit too much.
You don't want another Darren Till. You don't want
it. You definitely do not. No, you definitely do not. And it'll be interesting. Shimaev said he wants to fight at Fight Island in the coming weeks. Dana White is up for it. Yeah, I say why not? You know, he got the job done quickly last night. So, yeah, let's see. Like you said, you don't want to feed him too many guys up the ranks, but I'm just wondering who's going to want to fight him now. You know what I mean? There's not going to be too many people who are willing to line up. Definitely who are on a similar level or below him in the ranks. Maybe guys who are ahead of him in the ranks will say like they'll fancy their chances.
See, I don't think so, because you know you've got this hype train, right? Mm-hmm. And again, no disrespect to Darren Till whatsoever, but it was obvious that Darren Till was an elite striker without an elite ground game. Mm-hmm. Right? We can now see that Shimaev, seemingly from what we've seen of him, has a near to elite ground game with exceptionally good striking.
Yeah, right? and has loads of room to improve on that as well.
Yes, and you know, to just give some rationality to the Meerschaert win, like we know that Gerald Meerschaert isn't the quickest starter. Right? Mm-hmm. We've seen it in previous fights. If guys can get to him early, there's a clear route to victory there. Now, 17 seconds is early, right? It's seriously fucking early. Shimaev threw 2 strikes, a body kick, and then the right hand, right? And you're right. He backed him up. He put him under pressure, and that's just something you can't do. Like, to me right now, terrible matchups. You know, he's calling for Usman. He's calling for Adesanya. He's calling for these guys. Colby is a nightmare matchup for Shimaev. Dorino Burns is a nightmare matchup for Shimaev. Usman is a nightmare matchup. Adesanya is a nightmare matchup. Like, any of the top 5, I think, at middleweight or welterweight is a nightmare matchup for Shimaev right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I would say that not many of those guys are going to want to take that fight because you don't want to lose to that guy, right?
No, you don't. Like, there's a fine line, and when you're looking at a guy like Shimaev who has done what he's done over the last couple of months, and the hype that he's generated, is that you can come in there and you can take that hype. You know, if we were to go back to someone like Leon Edwards, is like, you know, he needs that kind of hype around him. If he were to say take that fight, and I don't think he will, I don't think that he probably should, but if he was to go in and take that fight and beat Shimaev, he takes all that hype off of him, you know. And it's something worth looking at, but it's a fine line. I don't think there's going to be too many people lining up. I don't know if they're going to be wanting to do the Damian Maia fight anymore.
God, no, don't do it. Don't fucking do it.
I'm not too keen. And it's like, yeah, you have the grappling aspect of it, but I think Shimaev probably takes him out on the feet. You've seen that the power that he possesses. He was very smart in the build-up of the fight against Meerschaert, talking about black belts and talking about his brown belt and talking about tapping Meerschaert off and just getting that seed into maybe Meerschaert's brain about the takedown and everything like that. And that's how that knockout came about last night. You know, he put the pressure on, got him backed up against the cage, made it seem maybe to Meerschaert that he was going to the takedown, and just blasted him with one right straight down the middle. And that was it. It was that wrestling aspect that you have where you can make somebody fear your takedown. It really opens up your striking as well. And it's a huge benefit to fighters who have that.
Thinking about it now, I wouldn't mind Bilal Muhammad, actually.
Yeah, that would be a fun fight. And Muhammad has looked quite good as well. I feel that Shimaev probably would have too much in the wrestling aspect for him. I think he'd probably dominate him a little bit too much, but
I'm not sure. Like, I think the thing that impresses me the most about Bilal Muhammad is he fights tall guys really well because he's not the tallest guy himself. He has deceptive power in that left hand. He's got a really good scramble. And if he does manage to get on top, which, you know, is a huge task against somebody like Shimaev, but if he manages to get on top, he is dominant there.
Yeah.
And I think he also has a really good gas tank, right? Now, of course, Shimaev hasn't made it out of you know, the first round or whatever it is. And, you know, we need to give a little bit of respect too. Like, the guys that he's fought, John Phillips is a really good European fighter. Reece McKee was touted as a huge prospect.
Reece McKee is a phenomenal fighter. Like,
I
you know
agree.
what I mean? And in hindsight, the way their fight went, it didn't look all that bad for Reece in comparison to the way the fight went last night. So, like, Reece McKee is going to come back and he is going to be successful in the UFC and pick up wins. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I hope that the match against the fight against Shimaev hasn't dealt Reece too much damage, right? Because he took a fair amount of damage in that fight, but equally that it hasn't knocked his confidence, as you know, that's his UFC debut, etc., etc.
Well, but if he was watching last night, he can gain some level of confidence off it. But I don't think it will damage his confidence. Look, he took the fight on short notice. Yeah. I think the ultimate goal for him was, you know, he obviously did want to get the win. It didn't happen, but he's there. He's in the UFC now. And I feel that his next fight, it will be more important than what that Shimaev fight was. And if he can go out there and get the win, it'll all be forgotten about, you know. So that's what he'll be looking towards. I think that's what he'll be looking towards. And there's rumors that he was saying that there could be a fight soon. So I'm looking forward to seeing. Looking forward to seeing who he's going to be fighting.
Talk to me about the clusterfuck that was Johnny Walker and Ryan Spann.
Whew, it was wild. Going into
it was just a bag of shit, really. Like, it was...
There's one way of describing it is that it was just wild. Going into the fight, I thought that if Johnny Walker was to come out in the style that he actually did come out and just start throwing some wild stuff, that he was going to get himself into trouble, and that almost happened. You know what I mean? I thought going into the fight, I would have liked to see Johnny Walker have a bit more patience, pick his shots a little bit better, because, you know, he has power. He has power there, but he just throws some wild shots and puts himself in a hell of a lot of trouble. And, you know, he got away with it last night, but if he was maybe
I don't
fighting a
know
higher,
how.
yeah, by the skin of his teeth last night, he got it done. And, you know, if he was fighting a higher level of opponent last night, he probably would not have got it done. I thought that Span probably made the mistake of initializing the takedown when he probably shouldn't have. He should have separated and tried to land more on the feet.
I mean, I think
Or,
the original mistake from Brian Spann, and again, this is not disrespect to him, is if you have a guy in mount and you've trapped one of his arms, you cannot let him come out behind you. You
no,
just can't, right? And Brian Spann should have been raining pure hell down from there. If he had to dismount and go to side control, fine. But you can't let him buck you off and come out the back door. You
no,
just can't. And then you're right. Then he shot for the takedown and he got blasted by some McGregor Velasquez elbows. And man, he took so many shots while his head was in there.
yeah,
So many shots. And, you know, I feel for Ryan Spann because I thought at the beginning of that fight that it was looking like he had all the tools to make this a good evening, right?
mm-hmm.
And then when he lost the mount and we move on from there. But I agree with you 100% that Johnny Walker, I'd be very interested to see what happens in his next fight, give John Kavanagh a proper camp with him and let's see what he can do with him. But man, the talk of that guy being the champion is way off.
No, absolutely
way
not.
off.
Yeah, I agree 100%. He's not even close right now, if you ask me. He's still young enough to develop into that fighter, but based on last night's performance, and that's what you have to do really, is base it off that performance. In my opinion, I don't think that he's ready just yet. You know, I'm talking about Span. You know, he learned tons from that fight last night. You know, it's probably his highest profile fight that he's had. He may have got caught up a little bit in the madness and the wildness of the fight.
He got rocked
Johnny,
too, right?
he did. He got hurt, and both fighters got hurt. You know, and it could have easily been Johnny Walker that was the guy who got finished too. You know, it was fine margins there between both of those guys, and when you're throwing heavy shots like those light heavyweights, you know, it doesn't take too much. Span, yeah, he'll look back and he'll feel that he could improve on certain aspects of the fight, I guess, with the mounted position like you talked about. Also going in for the takedown when someone was hurt rather than standing and maybe trying to finish him on the feet, and also staying into position and eating all those elbows. It was a horrible position.
Just
get away. Just get away. So look, he'll learn from that and he'll grow as a fighter. And I think that Span he definitely has the skills to get up there and perform as a top 15, top 10 guy. It's not all lost for him yet. And Johnny Walker is the same too. You know, he has the ability, but like any talks of a title fight for Johnny Walker right now it's way too premature.
People are talking about him versus Yuri Prochazka, and like I think Yuri Prochazka would probably flatline him.
Yes, talking about two guys who are wild, I guess Prochazka has a bit more. He's wild too, but it's more controlled wildness. I don't know.
Yeah. Like I see. I mean, look, if Prochazka was in the cage last night with Ryan Spann, I don't think it goes well for Johnny Walker. But yeah, I think Prochazka is obviously wild, but he's wild in the sense that his feints are strange and odd.
It's more of a controlled chaos with him. So it
exactly,
is,
exactly.
where he's very explosive, but yeah, I think I wouldn't even be looking that far ahead with Johnny Walker right now.
Give him a guy that's exactly the same sort of position as Ryan Spann, and let's see what happens.
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
Yeah. Now talk to me a little bit about, I've only got a couple of fights that I want to talk about left on this card before I want to ask you about your Izzy and Izzy and Costa, but talk to me about Mackenzie Dern. Fucking hell.
Whew. Yeah, I was speaking to you briefly last night, and it's like, you know, that level of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is just unbelievable. It's so great to look at. Unbelievable. And, you know, all credit to Ronda Marcos. She showed tons and tons of heart. And I thought, you know, she made the mistake of following Dern down to the ground when Dern had that slip. She should not have done that, and she'll be regretting that decision today for sure. But once it got down there and Dern got control of and got her into that guard position and started working her Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game, I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal to look at. It was unbelievable.
I agree. I mean, look, any fighter that ends up putting on the display that Mackenzie did after throwing a kick and falling on her ass, it gets my vote. Like, you know, like you're right. Randa Marcos made a mistake by jumping in, but Mackenzie was like, "Fuck, I've slipped. Okay, I'm just gonna armbar her now." Like,
yeah, well, she capitalized on that mistake, and you have to give her credit for doing that. You know what I mean? And when Marcos went in there, when she had a hold of her, it was pretty much the beginning of the end.
I mean, I thought, yeah, I agree. Like Mackenzie tried to set up the knee bar that she hit in her last couple of fights. That failed, went straight to a triangle. The triangle didn't work, so she was going straight for the arm. Then she gets to the 3/4 mount. Then she's working, and then snatches up that arm in such a disgustingly beautiful way.
And when you're talking about high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
Oh my God.
like those transitions into arm bars, into almost trying a go-go plata there, and then into the omoplata to use that to sweep, like that's phenomenal stuff. You know what I mean? That's
super high level shit.
Going forward for Mackenzie Dern, a great win for her. I wouldn't be throwing her too far up the rankings either. I'd be just given that was a perfect fight for her last night, and her next couple of fights need to be those level of kind of fights, giving her, like, she's not going to go in against the top of the division there and do all that much damage. I don't think right now. I think she has to develop maybe her stand-up game maybe a little bit more. We didn't see any of her stand-up last night, so we can't really say if it's improved all that much, but it was looking good in her last fight. Against Hannah Cyphers, I believe it was. Looked pretty good, and she's rocked a couple of the women in her division so far. So, you know, she's got power. She just needs maybe to find a little bit more technique to use it with, but that will come as the fights come as well. You know, it's just she's not ready. She's not ready for probably top 5 level opponents, but she's definitely ready for a solid challenge in a top 10 opponent. Maybe if you wanted to throw her top 15 too, I wouldn't argue all that much either.
I agree. So the fight that I am absolutely lamenting is Damon Jackson, Mirsad Bektic. Like, I said this to you on Twitter last night. Like, is Bektic the best, worst fighter that we know in the UFC, right? Like,
yeah,
he just always finds a way to lose. It's insane.
Yeah,
like the first 2 rounds against Damon Jackson, he performed well. He fought out of the guillotines. He, you know, was dominant when he got the takedown. He kept him there. He landed his shots. And then he just decided to just stay in the guillotine. And then when Damon Jackson got the mounted guillotine, he kind of just looked in the corner, all super relaxed, and then realized, fuck, I'm getting choked now. I should probably try and defend myself.
Yeah, it was super strange to see, and it's been a trend for his fights in recent fights. You know, he's been
since Darren Elkins, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know whether that fight broke his spirit, but that must have been a tough loss to take. You've got that fight. You've got the injuries that he had is not going to really help him all that much either. You know, it can take a hell of a lot out of a fighter, and it's just really hard to put your finger on what has gone wrong with Bektic, because he at one stage was looking like a real force to be reckoned with.
The Godfredo Pepe fight, everyone was like, he's killed that man with a solar plexus punch. Like, all aboard the fucking hype train. Let's go.
Oh, he was getting proper hype, and he deserved it too, you know.
Agree.
But yeah, he's just fallen off a cliff in recent fights, and you know, it's interesting to see what's going to happen with him down the line, and he needs to have a good think about things and see what he really wants or change it up, but it hasn't been happening for him, and he's got the skills, but I don't know, maybe he's missing a small bit of a mental edge right now or something. It's hard to put your finger on it.
I agree.
That was a very winnable fight last night for him as well, and
it really was.
He had the one. Like, the guy came in on 3 days' notice, and all credit to
Damon Jackson.
Damon Jackson, sorry. Damon
Second
Martin,
UFC 10 year.
They were
Damon
calling
Martin.
him Damon Martin.
Jesus Christ. If Damon
Yeah.
Martin had been in there and beat Mercer Bektik, that'd be the fight of
That,
the century.
yeah, unbelievable. But yeah, like he did a great job, and all credit to him on 3 days' notice. But you know, with Bektic, that was the only way that Jackson was going to win that fight. I feel was
With that
by
guillotine.
with a guillotine, or just like I believe that you're just playing with fire by going down with somebody like Jackson on the ground, who is pretty savvy on the ground. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so. I thought Bektic should have mixed it up maybe a little bit more last night and integrated his striking and mixed in his takedowns to keep Jackson guessing. And he just didn't do that. He stayed playing with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game of him, and ultimately he got caught. And he will have a huge amount of regrets today. Another one that slipped away.
Yeah. My final question on this card is going to be, what did you think of the stoppage for Rose Clark versus Sarah Alpar?
I thought I was massively confused at the time.
Same.
I thought that if you viewed the video replay, that meant that the fight was automatically over. And they were saying that in the commentary booth as well, which kind of cemented my thoughts. But just talking with Andy Stevenson, he brought up a couple of points and just put up a picture of the rules. And there's a small point in the rules saying that, yes, the fight can be stopped or can be put on timeout for a referee to check the video, which I have to admit, which was news to me.
Me too.
So he didn't do anything wrong. And I probably, if I were in the ref situation, I probably would have stopped the fight once I figured out that the shot was legal, because I don't think that fight should have continued on past that point at all. And I think that should be the talking point here.
I agree completely. Sarah Alpar took that knee. It cut her open badly. And it was just such a surreal sight to watch the referee put Jessica Rose Clark back in the same position, just with a woman in a puddle of blood.
Yeah, and her nose was broken into shit as well, man.
Man, her face was destroyed.
Yeah, it was tough to look at, and I thought once looking at the replay and once you figure out that the shot that was thrown was in fact legal, he would have still been within his rights to just say, okay, the shot was legal and I'm deeming the fight over because I don't feel that the fight can go on. And I was really confused, and the commentators didn't really help the situation in what they were saying, because they were sharing some misinformation. But ultimately, I feel the fight shouldn't have went on at that stage, and it should have been awarded a TKO victory for Clark at that stage.
Yep, I agree. And I just don't, then, we didn't need to see the extra round of damage. We didn't need to see it, right?
No.
And, I found out afterwards that Sarah Alpar is getting married in 3 weeks.
Oh, my goodness. That's crazy, yeah. So, maybe it's not the best idea to take a fight 3 weeks out before your wedding, but...
I mean, sure, but fuck me.
Yeah, I know. But I don't think a referee or anyone is going to be thinking about that when they're in there. But you'd be hoping for a little bit of help, I guess. But yeah, hopefully that all of her damage is fixed in the weeks coming for her wedding. So yeah, she looked pretty beat up last night now, so she's going to have a little bit of nursing to do. But hopefully she recovers fine.
So, take me through your thoughts on Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. Tell me.
I'm excited for the fight. I think that it's going to be an interesting fight. I think that if I was to look at this fight and only look at Costa's early appearances in the UFC and early performances, I think it would be a walkover for Adesanya. I do believe that Adesanya is head and shoulders above Costa in the striking aspect. Way better kickboxer, way more comfortable on the feet, just way more technical. Costa will depend a lot on his power. He will be looking for that big left hook. And I believe how Adesanya will counter that is just to try eat up the lead leg of Costa, try make him switch stances, try take away that power. The fact that it's in a bigger cage on Fight Island will have me leaning more towards Adesanya getting the job done. I think for strikers, having more space inside the cage is much better in order to get out of trouble. And what Costa is going to try and do is try to march forward and pin Adesanya up against the cage to try and land these heavy shots.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be interesting to see whether Costa tries to integrate takedowns into his game to try to keep Adesanya guessing that way. I can't really see it. I believe all the shit talk that has been talked or over and back, I believe that's a ploy by Adesanya to kind of get Costa maybe a little bit emotional to try come at him a little bit so that he can try pick him apart. Right now, and it might change by the time the fight comes, right now I can see Adesanya getting the victory. I think that he's just a much better striker than Costa. I believe he's going to fight at distance. He's going to try eat up the leg. I believe he'll try throw some body kicks, some straight kicks to the body, McGregor style teeps to the body. Try get at that gas tank of Costa and try pour it on towards the end of the fight. Something similar, maybe that's what you've seen last night with Colby Covington and Woodley, as in but Colby started slow and then up the pace as the fight went on. We might see that again with Adesanya. I'm not completely ruling out Costa. A guy, he is a skillful striker, just not as skillful as Adesanya. Mm-hmm. And he does have a lot more power, I believe, than what Adesanya will possess. But and Adesanya does have power as well, and he does have the ability to finish. But I believe Costa has more of a one-strike knockout power, whereas I believe, even though Adesanya hurt Robert Whittaker with that punch, he sat him down with it. I believe it's more of an accumulation of punches that Adesanya will land on Costa to do the damage if he is to get a finish. But it's a great fight. I'm not all the pre-fight talk and all that hasn't got me super hyped. I'm just more hyped about the stylistic aspect of the fight. Mm-hmm. Two undefeated fighters always adds an interesting aspect to the fight as well. But I do believe skill-wise that Adesanya has more than enough to get it done in the main event next weekend for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think that looking at this fight is simple enough in that if you look at the way that Uriah Hall fought Costa, that's the blueprint.
Mm-hmm,
right?
For sure. He was very successful with his jab.
Yes.
And also, if you look back one further than that, when Costa fought Johnny Hendricks, even you look at Johnny Hendricks having some success with the jab as well. So that's why I'd be looking at more keeping his distance and stuff like that.
So, and this is my kind of take on the fight is that if Izzy, and he is well able to, but if Izzy wants to put in a performance similar to Uriah Hall, right, then he will be able to eat a lot of damage into Costa. Mm-hmm. The difference, however, is Costa's kicking game has improved drastically since his beginning run of the UFC. Mm-hmm. He battered Uriah Hall with kicks. He battered Yoel Romero with kicks. And the only difference I have in the Yoel Romero fight to the Uriah Hall fight, essentially, is when Yoel Romero was backed against the fence and he hit Costa, he hit him with some serious power that made him respect him. Mm-hmm. Uriah Hall didn't have that power and got KO'd.
Yeah.
I think the problem you're going to have with Adesanya is if he does, or when he does get backed against the fence, he doesn't possess the same one-shot power, as you said, as Romero does. Mm-hmm. So what you're going to need is something else, whether that be knees or elbows or just superior footwork to not get yourself put on the back of the cage. Absolutely. If Costa can't get Adesanya to the cage, I think it's over quickly. To be honest, I think inside 3 rounds, I think Adesanya will touch him. He's got a superior reach. I think Costa loves a blitz, and we saw just what happened with blitzes when Robert Whittaker fought Adesanya, and I think Robert Whittaker's blitz is better than Costa's blitzing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Adesanya, if you're coming to just strike with him, it's going to be a really long night, as you've said.
I think so too. And I think that Costa has that belief in his ability that he will be able to stand and bang with him, but it might prove to be a costly mistake if he is going to have to fight a fight where he can't stand in front.
Oh God, yeah.
He can't stand in front of Adesanya and just let Adesanya pick him apart. It's just going to have to bum rush him, fight dirty boxing, like you said, get him up against the cage, make it dirty, clinch, try and tire him out, make it a real ugly fight. Maybe try go for the takedown. Adesanya's takedown defense has looked pretty decent in recent fights. It wouldn't suggest that Costa would have the ability to take him down, but you never know. If you're thinking that a guy is going to strike with you and he implements a heavy grappling plan, it might throw Adesanya off. But honestly, I think that this is going to be a stand-up war. I think that Costa will have the self-belief early in the fight that he can get it done, but I can't see anything going to Israel Adesanya picking him apart, using his footwork to get himself off the cage. You said that an important thing for Costa to get the win there was to get Adesanya's back against the cage, and I do believe that is important as well. I think Adesanya probably has too much good footwork to get himself stuck into those kind of positions, and he's not going to hang about there.
No.
The problem with Costa as well is that, he fought Yoel Romero, but that was a very long time ago. He has not been that active.
Agreed.
And also he hasn't fought a guy, in my opinion, with the caliber of striking that Adesanya has.
The rise of Adesanya, the guys that Adesanya has fought in comparison to the guys that Costa has fought is night and day difference.
Absolutely. It is for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%.
You know, like one of my favorite fights of all time after watching it is Izzy Adesanya, Kelvin Gastelum, right?
Phenomenal fight.
Absolutely phenomenal. And what you saw there from Adesanya is the ability to go as deep into the trenches as you're ever going to go, and come out and look and put on a display as if it was round one, right? Both of those guys were hurt. They were beat up. They were tired. And Izzy just decided not to be tired and decided to just go out there and put on an absolute hell of a performance in that 5th round. We haven't seen Costa have to do that. We haven't seen Costa really get dug into the trenches. And look, we could come out at the end of Saturday night, early Sunday morning. We could come out and Costa may run in there, land a left hook, and it'd be over.
It is MMA after all, you know.
It is MMA after all.
Anything could happen, you know, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I'm looking forward to seeing how Adesanya looks, you know, coming back off some criticism of that Yoel Romero fight where he was criticized for not maybe letting go as much as he should. In my opinion, maybe he could have let go a little bit more, but I wasn't super critical at the time. It's very hard to fight a fighter who doesn't really want to open up and fight you.
Yes.
And that's kind of what Yoel Romero did in that fight. And going into this fight with Costa, I do believe that he's not going to have that same problem. I think that Costa has that belief about himself that he can open up and can get the better of Adesanya. And that self-belief may put him into a certain level of trouble when he finds out how good a striker that Adesanya is, if Adesanya chooses to let go this time.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the big difference between those fights is that in the Yoel Romero fight, I mean, Izzy Adesanya is a counter striker, right? He's a counter striker. In order for you to counter strike, you need somebody to come to you. Yoel Romero chose not to come to him. Paulo Costa will 100% come to Izzy Adesanya.
And going back to what I said about all the trash talk and all the over and back that has been going on with between Adesanya and Costa, you know, all this shit talk coming from Adesanya, that's all bait, and to try and bait Costa to come in at him, all this steroid talk and everything like that. It's all bait for Costa to come in there emotional and to start swinging and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see if he does, or what kind of a game plan he brings to the table, or what kind of a game plan that Adesanya brings to the table.
Well, they did you see on Twitter just before I joined the podcast, I had a quick look on Twitter and I saw that there's a video that's been leaked where Izzy and Costa have met in the hotel. Have you seen this?
I've seen it. I actually did catch a glimpse of it. Yeah, they're like super friendly, which
super friendly. And Izzy went up to Costa and was like, "Oh, you're looking skinny," and he was like, "Lean, not skinny."
Lean, not skinny. Yeah, and they had a good laugh. It kind of pours all the water on all the shit talk that was happening before that. But look, like I said, I'm not interested in that aspect of this fight. I'm interested to see how it goes down when the both of them step in there. I'm interested to see what game plans both teams brought up. I think that, we know Eugene Behrman and the guys over there at City Kickboxing can put together a good game plan. We've seen that with Volkanovski when he fought Holloway, and with the second time with the heavy leg kicks. And, we could see that again last night. I think Costa's biggest trait that he has is his power. You take away his legs and that power goes away, and I'm not too sure how he wins it after that. He's not going to win the striking battle with Adesanya, so that's why I feel that leg kicks for Adesanya are going to be a big aspect in this fight.
I agree. Have you any other thoughts that you want to run through on the Adesanya Costa fight?
No, that's pretty much it. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's pretty much going to be a stand-up battle. I think Adesanya is going to get the nod. I'm leaning towards an Adesanya decision right now, but if he implements his game plan, gets Costa tired, he could get him out of there in the latter rounds as well.
Yeah, the reason why I lean towards a finish is we've never really seen Costa hurt. We saw him clipped against Yoel, but never really damaged is what I mean, right? And I agree with you that I think leg kicks are going to be a big part of this. And I think if you batter the leg of Costa so much that he's really wary to even put weight on it, then how easy for the taking is it for Izzy? And the answer is it's probably pretty easy for the taking. So that's my route to victory for Izzy. But I think for Costa, as you've rightly said, look, I mean, Jesus, if he clips him with anything, really.
Oh yeah, well he's got the power to finish any fight, really, and you'd be foolish to think otherwise. It's like, I don't mean any disrespect when I'm talking about the levels of striking, because when you possess the power that he has, it's enough power to finish any fight, and all you have to do is time one punch, and he has that one punch power that, like I said, Adesanya does not have. And that really makes this fight interesting for me. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a puncher's chance. He has a bit more of a puncher's chance, but it's kind of along the lines that I'm going. It should be a super interesting fight. I can't look past Adesanya here, and I think that he has enough to get the job done.
I agree. All right, my friend. Well, if you want to tell people where they can find you, where can they find your work? Where can they find your opinions? How can they get in touch with you?
Yep. You can find all my work over at severemma.com. Constantly producing content over there. You can find me on Twitter on IO'Neill MMA. You can find me on Instagram at the same handle at IO'Neill MMA as well. I'll be producing tons of content this week. I'll have something on the Cage Warriors cards. I'll have something on the UFC pay-per-view coming up. Go over to Severe MMA on Patreon as well. There's going to be tons of content over there. Sean and the guys are going to be doing tons of content. We've got the Severe Fantasy MMA League going on the Patreon as well. So that's tons of fun. Myself and Thomas Delaney have set up that, and it's going really well. So we're in season 2 right now, and that's tons of fun. We just pick we just pick fights, co-main and the main event of fight night cards, and we pick 5 fights on the pay-per-view, and whoever has the most amount of points at the end of the year gets the coveted title, I guess. But
yeah, so the other way that people can get involved in the podcast, the Severe podcast, is severemma.com/pint, which I think is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It for the content that Sean produces over there for like $5 a month is next to none. You're not going to find it anywhere else. And you know, just he bangs out numerous podcasts each week, and he's just atrocious to get the content out. And yeah, go over there, support that. It supports the website, it supports Sean, and it helps get our name out there too. So it's a worthy cause for sure to support.
I agree. Well, I will say a vast thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Man, it's a pleasure. It's always good to have somebody to talk shop with and to talk some fights. I think as I've said to you off air, it would be great to have you on the balance breakdown for the Khabib Gaethje, because I mean, Jesus, there's just so much to talk about in that fight.
Phenomenal card, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I'd love
it really,
to do that.
really is. So yeah, that would be fantastic. But yeah, if anyone hasn't already, please go and check Ian's work on Severe MMA. Give him a follow on Twitter and Instagram and all that good stuff. And yeah, I will wish you a phenomenal part of your day. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry. All the best to you too, man. And I'll chat to you again soon.